All right, hello everybody. Welcome back to another UEFN tutorial, and today we are going to be looking at landscape inside of UEFN. Unlike Unreal Engine 5, one of the things that UEFN kind of has going for it, I guess, in comparison to that game development engine, is the fact that they already have landscape materials made for you. This is really helpful, and we'll talk more about why later. But this is one of the nicest things they have here. And then they also have the ability to make new material instances off of a specific landscape. But that's one of the best things they have. We'll go into how to set that all up in a second, but that's one of the reasons why I really like UEFN. But anyways, what is landscape? So understand that there are generally a couple different type of actors you can have in a game, but a static mesh actor in specific is made up of what we would call a polygonal region, which means how it's generated or how it's shown on the screen is based off of its vertices, edges, and faces. So like let's say I have this box, for example. This box, or here, let me move this box. Let's make a new box. Right, this box, for example, its makeup on the screen and how it's rendered is based off of its faces, which are these 2D faces here, right? So this would be a face that I'm dragging and it's highlighted, its vertices, and its edges, right? And these things come together to make the shape. And essentially, it's texture streams onto the screen and whatnot, not to get into too much of the math, but essentially, that's how that's rendered on the screen. Now, that's good and it's great. And you can use what's known as LOD, which is layers of detail, to essentially dynamically render how much detail you want to show up on a static mesh. But they are expensive, right? Not super expensive. Obviously, the more polygons you add, the more expensive it is. But the reason why landscape is so good is because of how it's created and how it's dynamic, how it's generated. It's generated using voxels, right? Which is fundamentally different than how static meshes act, right? So landscape is much less intensive resource wise on a computer. And that's why generally, if you can use landscape, you should use landscape. So let's look at how you create landscape. I'm going to first come here and click into the landscape mode. And now you can use something like Gaia to make your own landscape if you have a import file here. So you can come here and import a file if you wanted to, or you can just come here and click create new. And this grid here is going to show you where the landscape is going to be generated. You can obviously then come here and scale this down if you want it to be smaller, right? You can make this whatever size you want, right? And then you can also set the quadrants, some world partitioning stuff, all that good stuff here. And then, of course, you can create your material here, right? So if you wanted a different material, let's say you want to use chapter 2 or chapter 4 jungle, right? This is chapter 1, right? Like all the landscape materials, which will be used for texturing the landscape here, are right here. So this is where you can choose them, right? Here's the path. You can also make your own as well. That's a whole separate video, but you can also make your own. So I'm going to go ahead and click create landscape here. And as you'll see, this will then generate some landscape. Let's give it a second. And there you have it. So after you generate the landscape, you can come in and add different layers of landscape. You can add some landscape, you can generate new landscape, you can delete different landscape. You can also use splines, which we'll talk about later, to adjust landscape. But after you're in landscape mode, you have a variety of options here. So sculpt is going to allow you to sculpt, as you could imagine, the landscape, just like so. If you hold shift, you'll also push it down on the landscape. The tool strength and brush size tell you exactly that. And then the fall off is how much it's going to go down or up based on like how it's sculpted and whatnot. Next, you have erase. Erase does exactly what it says. It will erase. Right, so if you need to erase, you can erase, and then you have again brush fall off shapes. So that's how the brush is going to manipulate with or act with the terrain and do fall off and all of that good stuff. The next one you have is smooth. Smooth is going to smoothen out your landscape, as I'm sure you could guess. You also have flatten, which will flatten out the landscape. So you have sculpt, which will sculpt it up like this, and then flatten, which will allow you to flatten it like that. You also have the ramp, which allows you to make a ramp. So I can click here, drag this over and move this over like that. And then I can click add ramp, which will click that, add a ramp. I can also use erosion. So erosion, there's erosion from like soil and stuff like that, right? So there's erosion that comes from soil where you can come here, You can set like the surface thickness, the iteration. You can change noise. We'll talk about what noise is in a second, but essentially it's erosion from like soil, right? So if there was like soil here, right, like it would simulate erosion as if there was like erosion from sand or soil, right? You also have erosion from water, which will be this one, so the hydro erosion. So this will change it so that like if the sand like bumps into the ground or like there's rain and stuff like that, that's erosion from like water. So you have erosion from soil and then erosion from water, right? You also have noise. So noise generally in programming means like Perlin noise. Essentially what it's describing is randomness. It's a way to create randomness generally in any, it's like a random algorithm, right? So essentially, whenever you use noise, this is going to randomly go up and down, right? And just randomly generate like terrain going up and down to create randomness, right? As you would imagine. And then in an erosion here, when you have the noise mode and noise scale, that's again changing like the randomness in that, right? So that's what those will do there. Visibility is going to allow you to change the visibility. Obviously, you can also mirror certain parts of the train, select certain parts of the train, and copy. I won't go through all of this and how this all works. This is pretty intuitive, but just like normal here, you can come through here and start to smoothen out different areas of the terrain, smoothen out different parts of it, right? And this is just in general how it works. It's very similar to Unreal Engine 5. If you watch my tutorial series on that, it's very similar to that. So last thing we're going to cover here is painting. Okay, so painting is a little bit different than it was in UE5 because of how the layering system works. But essentially here, you have different ways to paint. You also have the ability to smoothen out specific layers, flatten, and use noise or randomness to generate specific layers, right? So essentially you want to think of it as layer one being like the base layer, and then you slowly work up over time. So layer one is the base layer, right? After that, you have layer two, which goes on layer one, like this, right? Then you have layer three, which will go over that layer, right? So layer three will overwrite layer two, but layer two won't overwrite layer three. So if I come back here, you won't get the overwrite. So you generally want to start with your first bottom layer, which would be in this case this one, and then slowly work your way up over time, right? So I can come here, kind of touch this, boom, move through. I can also come here and add like a little bit of clovers as well. Wanted to touch on some clovers. But essentially this is how it works. You also come through here and smoothen out some stuff. And yeah, this is essentially how you can generate and create terrain. Now, you also have the layer option here and the alpha, which is going to allow you to change how much the materials are blended together. As you can see, the more I change the alpha here on the, well, let me be more specific here. So this will change like how up and down it goes, this one. And then if you're in paint, you can actually blend the materials together a little bit. So this will allow you to change how much the layers are blended together. Is going to be these alpha. And as you can see, I get a little bit different level of blend here, depending upon which alpha I pick. So that's another nice little trick that you can use there. And that's pretty much it for the landscape. Now, there are some techniques that you should learn on how to create landscape, and we didn't really cover how to make landscape materials. I did do an entire series on that in Unreal Engine 5. So if you have a question, I would reference that video. But I could probably do another one inside of UEFN as well. It's not that different. But anyways, I hope anybody watching this found this tutorial really, really helpful. As always, I know I've been doing a lot of Fortnite gameplay content and coaching content, but I'm still am, the coding instructor and still teach UEFN all the time. This is actually mainly what I do most of the time. So If this video helped you in any ways, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.